Our first storyteller tonight, which remember is the first spot, so you're going to make him feel welcome. He has never performed here in San Francisco. He is the voice, on Radio Voices, he is Dynamite. He has a band called Matt Holdaway's Story Army. He has a brand new CD which just came out called Tiger, and it's for sale back there in the corner by Maxine Holloway's Unmentionables. And he's in the first spot, so you're going to be amazing to him. Please welcome to the stage, Matt Holdaway.
Hey, everybody. So this is a real pleasure for me to be here at Bawdy. I love Dixie and I love Bawdy, and I've never even been in the Verdi Club before, so I am green to the Verdi. Now, when I first moved to California, I grew up in Idaho, and I wrote, and I was very creative. I was probably the most creative person in the sticks. But when I got out here, it was definitely a different ballgame for me. And people weren't just lining up just to give me money to write for them, and I had to actually get a job. So I've worked for the phone company on a number of occasions, and that seems to be my wage slave thing during the day. And then at night I tell stories, and I have my story rock band, and you can get my new CD in the back if you come back and see me afterwards. So I just moved to LA, and I was working for a company where people would call up to order stuff from catalogs, mostly like Right Start catalog for baby products, or Langenbach for garden supplies, or toys. And I would just get a computer and it would say who I'm representing, and then I'd be like, okay, I'll sell you your toys, or I'll sell you your baby stuff, or whatever. There were about 300 people that worked in the building, and there were only about 20 dudes, and most of them were a lot older than me because they were in tech. So it's definitely a woman-run company, and purely by default, I ended up as the office hottie. And I loved it. And so I'd go to the bathroom, and there was a group of women that would always catcall to me ooh, I'd butter his biscuit, and I loved every second of it. So there was a woman who was recently divorced, and she'd look me up and down like I was a plate of baby back ribs every time she'd see me. And she'd always be like, my phone's not working, come back to my desk. And I'm like, I'm not a tech, I'm an operator. And she's like, come back to my desk. So there was a few people that I screwed around with. There was a couple of girls that I went to college with, and then this dude that was about my age, and we'd all make fun of the customers, we'd make fun of our coworkers, we'd make fun of what we sold. We'd just have a good time making fun of everything. And one of the days, one of the instructors said, we're gonna have a product demonstration, so everyone come on back. So we all get off the floor and we're all just goofing around. And they're showing us all the stuff that our suckers/customers are paying oodles of money for. It's oh, these are the padded corners, or here's the piddlers for the young potty training man to aim at. A Cheerio wouldn't work, but we're selling them for 6 for $2, and they're going like hotcakes. So basically, it's for people who have more money than sense, and that was our business. So they pull out this thing called the Moses basket, which was this 80-pound bassinet that had handles on it for some reason, just in case a mom's gonna throw her baby and stuff and wheel it around. And then they pull out this thing that looks sexual in nature, and everyone's like, "Ooh, what is that?" And the instructor goes, "This is our newest feature. This is a dual breast pump with a Y valve for changing the bottle in mid-pump." And so they start handing it around, and it gets back to me. And this is LA, so my work uniform was flip-flops, board shorts, and a tank top. And Brian goes, "You should try it, Holmes." And I want to say I thought about it for a second. I didn't think about it for a second. And I'm like, okay. So I lift up my tank top and I put the breast pump on and I start pumping away. Because I don't know, I got nipples, I got white blood cells. Can milk come out? I'm interested to find out. So I'm pumping away. And it's just it's not really getting a good seal. I don't have the biggest of boobs. And so I look at the instructor to see if I'm gonna get in trouble, and she's smiling all wide mouth, and that's all the go ahead I need. So I flex my biceps and I push my pecs together and I start pumping away. And all of a sudden I get a seal. And I get this amazing tingling sensation in my nipples. And I'm like, I think it's working. And Brian goes, "Keep going, man, keep going." So I keep pumping away. I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm dying to see. I want to see if milk's gonna come flying out. But instead it just goes thump thump, and both of my nipples get sucked into this thing super far. I let go and it's still holding on. It's a titty twister times 10 zillion. I'm in immense pain, super immense pain, because it's my erotic zone's just being And And like everyone's laughing, no one's helping. Brian like tries to pump it some more. I'm like, stop, man, stop. So I do my best. I try and like squeeze like some kind of like air pocket in there or something like that, but nothing doing. Like these are like as tight as they've ever been. Like it's got all the give it's gonna give. And like, so I'm like thinking and I'm like, oh God. Like, so I just like try and just rip it off. And I'm like, oh. And it's like, it's not gonna happen. Like, I'm pretty sure it's just gonna like rip straight off of me. And so I imagine that like, I'm gonna have to go to the hospital, like wheeled out in a gurney with this thing on me. I'm no longer gonna be the office hottie. Like, I'm definitely gonna be the guy who got the breast pump stuck on him. So I'm like, all right, think, Matt, think. Like, how can you get yourself out of this situation? You got yourself into this. And so I'm like, oh, the Y valve. And so like I stick my thumb up and I like find it and I catch the guard and whoa, glorious air feels the pump. And I pull it off and I got these like giant red circles around like both my nipples. I hand it to Brian, he takes it like it's a dead rat. And the instructor's like, well, if Matt's quite finished, we'll continue. And the instructor, the divorcee leans over and she's all, actually, I'd like another product demonstration. So later, LA wasn't quite my scene. I moved to the Bay, and the first job I got in Oakland was as the quality observation monitor. So when you call the phone company and you hear, this call may be monitored for quality and training purposes, I was the monitor. I worked in Oakland for Pacific Bell on a skyscraper on the 8th floor, and I had 300 employees I was supposed to listen to every week, so roughly like 60 a day. So I'd listen to their phone calls, and it was an extremely boring job because sometimes you would listen to somebody on hold. Imagine how exciting that is. So they had a tough time keeping people in the position, but once I figured out that I had a little card that they were supposed to do, and it wasn't to see if they were polite, it wasn't to see if they were taking care of business, it was to see if they were being obnoxious on the sales. And once I figured that out and realized that a lot of the people working there were like older than me and had kids my age, I was like, you know what, you're doing great on the sales pushing thing. So once I started saying everybody was doing perfect and they figured that out, they were like, oh, Matt's awesome, and he's our best quality observation monitor we've ever had. And I would fill out these forms to show that every week they made improvement regardless of how they did last week, and no matter how perfect, they got even more perfect. So for the most part, I really wouldn't do my job, and I'd spend most of my time smoking out in the parking garage with the coffee guy. And then I'd spend a lot of time on Hubble Telescope's website, which was just popping off at the time. I'm like, oh my God, look at Neptune. But every now and then I'd do my job. Not often, but every now and then. So I was sitting there reading an X-Men graphic novel and listening to a phone call. And it's a pretty common call. It was a dude, a customer. He was late on his bill, and he was trying to make arrangements to keep his phone on. And the operator is making arrangements so he can keep it on. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he goes, so what are you wearing? And I'm like, oh my God, I gotta sit up, and I'm jumping up to hit the interrupt button so I can be like, sir, your behavior is completely inappropriate. I have your name and address. If you wish to keep your phone on, we are gonna be discussing this. And I was gonna put a little note on his record and then go find the operator and be like, sorry, this is part of dealing with the customers. Why don't you take a half-hour break, and if you want some counseling, you can come speak with me. But before I could hit the interrupt button, she goes, ooh, I'm wearing a lime green top, a black mini skirt, and stiletto heels. So my finger's hovering over the button, on the management side, I should go get mad at her and get mad at him, but this is the most excitement I've seen at this job, and I definitely want to see where this is going. So I don't push the interrupt button, and he goes, so what do you look like? And she goes, ooh, I got blonde hair and double D's and a booty that don't stop. Now, I work with these people. I've seen them all. We go to meetings and stuff, and I'm like, who is this girl? So I'm looking like a woodchuck, poking my head out of my cubit, looking around. And everybody's looking over at me oh crap, the monitor's look busy. And so they're looking busy, but I'm looking. And I mean, it's a whole floor. There's elevators, there's pillars and stuff. I can't see absolutely everybody, but I'm dying to see, and I'm looking to see whose mouth is moving just the right way. Nobody's. So I'm all right. So I just sit back down to listen. And he goes, so what's your favorite positions? And she goes, I like a wide variety of positions. I'm open to almost all of them. I really think missionary is totally underrated. You can do a lot with missionary. I'm like, you know what? I've been saying the same thing. And she goes, but I love doggy style. And I'm like, oh my God, I love doggy style. And she's like, and I got a tongue ring, and you know what that's for. And I'm like, oh my God, I totally know what that's for. I gotta find out who this girl is. So I'm looking, but nothing doing. So they're going back and forth. It's getting really hot. He's talking about taking her to a cabin in Tahoe. She's talking about giving him Hummers with an ice cube. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, this is awesome. Like, am I getting paid for this? So they have this like uncomfortable spot. And he goes, oh, baby, where were we? And she goes, ooh, I was telling you about the Basics Plus 10. It's our most comprehensive package ever. He's all, oh, sign me up, baby, sign me up. And I see on the computer screen, he just got signed up for like all these things. And he confirmed it twice. That all these things he's never gonna use. He's paying 70 extra bucks a month now. He couldn't pay his bill in the first place, but now he gets select ringing, and call forwarding, and three-way calling. So I gotta find out who this girl is. So I go over to her manager and I'm like, yo, Lewis, who's 7649? And he's like, oh God, what does she do now? Because I have to have a legitimate reason to talk to her. And I'm like, oh, she turned a delinquent into a plus 10. And he's all, she got a plus 10? Because nobody gets a plus 10, because nobody's stupid enough to buy a plus 10. And I'm like, yeah, can you believe it? I was thinking we'd give her something out of the swag box. And he's like, well, that's just the kind of turnaround I was hoping from her. Yeah, let's do that. So we go over to the swag box and it's got like lanyards and bubble things and like a bunch of crap. But they got a gift certificate for Lois the Pie Queens, which is like got the bomb pie. So I'm like, oh, sweet. So I grab, yeah, you guys know Lois. Love that pie. So yeah, so I grabbed the gift certificate. And then me and Lewis are walking towards her desk. We're both in our suits. She looks over and sees us, and I see her face go, oh, shit. And she starts taking her pictures off of her cubit wall and putting them into her purse. We walk up, and Lewis goes, hey, Matt, heard you got a plus 10, way to go, and knocks on her desk and walks off. I'm standing there smiling all stupid, holding the gift certificate. I'm like, oh, I got you a gift certificate. She's like, you heard that last call? I'm like, yeah, you were pretty good at that. She goes, I used to be a phone sex operator. I said I had operating experience, and that's how I got the job. And I'm like, now listen, I could admire your creativity when it comes to getting to the sales, but for sure, if anybody hear you do that, you'd be so fired, like no second chance. And I'd get fired if I didn't fire you. So you gotta promise me, you will never, ever, ever repeat that sales technique again. She goes, oh, thank you so much, I got a baby. And I'm like, no, promise. She's all, I promise. And as I walked away, she flashed her tongue ring at me.